Hello and welcome to the first video for the EDMA 5240 class for the semester. I'd like to go over a couple of things that are going to be really critical in terms of your ability to find documents for the major assignments in the course, as well as to appropriately cite the materials that you find. So the information that you're going to learn today may not be completely new to all of you. In fact, I'm hoping that many of you have encountered this information in either EDGS 5510 if you've taken that, or another class that you've had in your master's program. I'm only going to go over things pretty briefly. There's information available at the library's website that can fill in some of the gaps. And for those of you that do already know this, then it'll just serve as a good review, but not take too much time in doing so. So just to let you know also that information, some of the information in the slides that I'm going to be showing you today does come from a presentation that one of our reference librarians, Mr. Warren Jacobs, put together for a course that I was teaching in the fall semester. So some of you may have seen some of the content in these slides before. So things that I'd like to go over with regard to searching is that basically the main assignments that you're going to be doing in this class require that you actually find actual studies, which are not typically things that you will be able to access by doing a more traditional Google search. You really need to be able to utilize the various databases that the library has subscribed to be able to get into research. So I'm going to kind of take you through how you quickly get into the library's website, and how do you access a couple of databases like the ERIC database, which is probably the one that you would be most likely to use. I also want to mention ProQuest theses and dissertations because that's another really good one in terms of actually getting access to studies. And there are a couple others that might be useful to you at one point or another. And then also when I'm going through that, I want to show you how you can restrict your searches so that the results you get are not just going to be somebody's opinion, but an actual study. So at this point, I have navigated to our campus library's website, which is just library.csustan.edu. There's a link to the library and Blackboard as well. And what I'm going to do initially is click here where it says Journal Articles. And we're actually going to go, we can get to it a couple ways, but we're going to go to Articles by Subject. And that will take us to a spot where we can click Education. And then there's a couple of databases there that are possibly useful. ERIC is the one that I'm going to get into today. That one is hosted by the federal government, and it is basically a database that it contains links to a lot of actual studies as well as other kinds of educational materials. And the nice thing about ERIC is that our campus has a collection of databases to which it subscribes, so that if you search in ERIC, if the campus has an electronic subscription to a journal, you can have access to the article as a PDF document. So that's very useful, meaning you don't have to set foot in the library to access a lot of articles. Academic Search Premier is also another database that you might find useful, and I'm not going to actually go into that one today because the way you search it is exactly the same as in ERIC. It's just a different database. So if you're searching in ERIC and don't find what you're looking for, come back and just try a different database. ProQuest theses and dissertations is another one that I want to talk about. If you click on this one, that one will restrict your searches to only theses and dissertations that have been completed pretty much anywhere in the US and in some cases internationally. So you know that the things that you're accessing are also going to be studies. So that's important because that would be a good one for you to access. And then this one, PsycInfo, is another good one as well. But we're going to go to ERIC, and ERIC is pretty user-friendly. I'm accessing the database from off campus right now, so if you are doing that, you need to type in your user information, but not a big deal. Once you type it in the first time in any given session, then you can access any of the databases without having to re-log in. So the main database is set up in a way where you can select your search terms. There are different types of fields that you can identify. You can, if you know an author, put that in. You can use descriptors that are actual terms within ERIC that they've defined. But a lot of times you can be pretty successful in thinking about good keywords related to your search. So if I was interested in finding a study about, let's just say, keyboarding and writing skills, to see the influence or impact of keyboarding on writing skills, I can type search terms into multiple lines and then click the search button. I can click this plus if I want to add additional lines. There are various choices that I can make under search options. So full text, for example, would return only those materials to which the university would give me access to the full text. You may want to do that. That would make sure that you would get a PDF of the material, but our library, interlibrary loan system will get anything to you for free relatively quickly. So I'm not going to check that one for now. And anything else, if I want to restrict it by date and other characteristics, I can do that. I'm just going to actually click search right now so that we can see what comes up. This one tells me there are 103 results. They may or may not actually be studies. You can see this first one, it does give me PDF full text. The second one gives me PDF full text. So I can look at the title and see if it seems like it would be something that relates to what I might be interested in. And when I click on it, it will give me the full abstract. And I realize a little bit is cut off on the right here, but I can read it to determine whether this is an actual study or whether it's somebody's opinion of something. And so if I'm looking for an actual study related to the effectiveness of keyboarding and writing, then maybe I can, based on the abstract, determine whether it's worth looking at the document itself. So if I do decide that I want to download it, there's an option, PDF full text, that I just click. And once I do so, it will download the document to my computer. And it's not quite downloaded yet, but once it is downloaded, then it will open up in Acrobat Reader. I can save that document so that I can access it later without having to go back into the library's website and manipulate it however I wish. So that's generally how you can work within ERIC. One other thing that I want to point out is that if you type in various search terms, there's no guarantee that what you get is going to be a study. So you can use various terms in one of the search boxes, like qualitative or quantitative or empirical or the word study or something that would restrict the search. This one actually only yielded one search, and it looks like it may not actually be a study. Let me change this to quantitative. Let's see, quantitative, and see what comes up. No results for that one. Let me change it to study. I get 45. So that might help restrict the search a little bit more. If the library, let's see if I can find one here. If the library doesn't have the study directly, there may be, this one we would click right here and it would bring up the study for us. Some of those that are older are going to work like this. There's a download full text link over on the right hand side that we could use. Go back a little bit here. Trying to find one. Okay, that if it has this Find It button, click Find It, and what that will do is search the subscriptions to the library's database and see if we actually subscribe to the journal where that article was published. If we do, then there would be a link right up here that would tell you which database, which subscription actually contains that, and you could click it to download. In this case, our library doesn't hold a subscription to this particular journal, so if I request a copy through interlibrary loan, then what would happen is it brings up another window automatically. It has all of the reference information populated, and all you have to do is actually click Submit Request. That will go to an interlibrary loan specialist in our library. You'll get an email to your campus email account within a couple of days with instructions to what you have to do to download it. And it will be available in your electronic account within the library for 30 days. You can certainly download it as a PDF and use it longer than that, but it's a viable option as well. So that's basically how to utilize ERIC. If you choose a different database, so I can go back to the full list. I was in ERIC before, but if I go to, let's just say, PsycInfo, everything looks the same. It just up here says, instead of searching ERIC, it says searching PsycInfo. So the way you search is identical. It has the same interface. So I think once you do a search, you'll kind of get what's going on. If you do a search using Google or another search engine, the thing is you might be able to find information about useful studies, but the studies themselves are typically copyrighted in journals, and so they're not available in Google. You really have to be in these other databases to be able to access the research articles themselves. So that's really where you need to start your searching. You need to kind of scrap Google or some of your other favorite search engines to begin with. So the other thing that I wanted to do today is go over a couple of very basic formatting things that align with APA, which is the way you need to create and format your in-text citations as well as your reference list citations in this class and all of your MA classes. So it works for everything across the board. I'm not going to go over all the little details, but the key things that you'll need to know for this class are things that I do want to go over quickly. So first of all, in terms of your reference list, APA requires that there are 4 pieces of information that are included in every reference. You need to include information about the author, you need to include the publication date, you need to include the title of the document, and then you need to include the publication information, which for a journal would be the name of the journal, the volume, the issue number, and the page numbers. I'm not going to talk about books because in this class you're not going to be citing books just based on the nature of the assignments. So each one of these fields will appear in order in your citation. There should be a period after each one of these. And if there are multiple authors in any document, make sure that you retain the order of the authors as noted in the article itself, because that relates to the contribution each person made to the document. Also, you need to italicize the name of the resource that you use. So the resource itself would be the journal name, not the article name. So an example of how you might cite things is there are documents in ERIC that are called ERIC documents, meaning that those documents are not published in a journal. Instead, they actually have an ED number, ERIC document number. So in those cases, the citation will look something like this, where it begins with an author followed by a period. The author might be an organization name like California State Department of Ed. The date is followed by a period. The document title is italicized. Also note, only the first letter of the first word, the first letter of any word after a colon, and if there were any proper nouns, those would be capitalized as well, but otherwise all the words are, they have a small letter, which is a little unusual. And then in an ERIC document, you need to have a little information about where the publication comes from. So I have all of this information in an outline in Blackboard as well that you can download, but this would be an example of what it ought to look like. If you are using a thesis or dissertation, there are a couple different formats. This would be a thesis that you pull off the shelf in our library. Again, the title only has the first letter of the first word capitalized. It has unpublished master's thesis actually in parentheses. The name of the institution is listed. And then also you can download recent theses and dissertations from our campus. If you go to the library's main website and type in a person's name as author under book. And if you do it that way, then there's a retrieval web address that you would include instead. So if you get a thesis from our campus electronically, this would be how you know it. And then this would be one that you would get from ProQuest Theses and Dissertations. So it comes from off campus, it comes from someplace else, a different institution. So this would begin with the author information. Note that the author's first name is never listed, only the first initial. And then again, italicized name of the document, small letters except for the first one or any word after a colon or any proper noun. And then you have a statement saying retrieved from ProQuest Dissertations and Theses, and there will be a UMI number listed when you go into the document that you note. Note there is no period after the UMI number. That's not a typo, that's the way it goes. So most of the articles that you'll be using for class, or most of the studies, are likely to come from journals. And so this is an example of the way a journal citation would go. You would list authors. If there are multiple authors, you would have an ampersand before the very last one, followed by date. And in this case, because the actual, the resource name is a journal called Exceptional Children, that's what is italicized. The title of the article is not italicized. We have the same capitalization conventions that I noted before, only the first letter of the title is capitalized in this case. The volume number of the journal is also italicized, and then the issue number is inside parentheses. There's no spacing between it. And then the page numbers, note that there is no P before the 8, and then everything ends with a period. This is an article, a citation for an article that has what's called a document object identifier, a DOI number. So it's exactly the same as what I just showed you before in the previous slide, but it also ends with DOI, all lowercase, colon, and then whatever the DOI number is that's listed in the article. So if there is a DOI, you will see it usually in several places in the article, and in ERIC on the abstract page, it'll list it there as well. Do note that all of the reference list citations have an indentation in line 2 and beyond, a hanging indent, which can be created with your word processor. I'll show you how to do that in a bit. If you are using a web page, for example, in an introduction to something where you're not worried about using an actual study, then the citation format, it follows the same fields previously with author, the year, the title, and if there's a subtitle, those things would be italicized. And then you actually write the words retrieved from followed by the web address. You do not end with a period. So sometimes there might be more information than that noted, but this is minimum in terms of what APA says needs to be included for web page information. The actual reference list always begins on a separate page from the narrative. You'll have reference list as a header for that page. And then all of the references are going to be alphabetized within the reference list using the first author of each document that you include. Sometimes, if there is no author, then you would use the first significant word of the title of a document. So sometimes there are documents that get written by, might be the federal government, or it might be things that you find on the web page where you can't find an author. Those would be situations where you would begin with the first word of the title. The entire reference list should be double spaced. There should not be any extra vertical spacing between the entries. And then again, entries have a hanging indent. So I'm going to just open up my word processor real quickly and show you how to do the hanging indent. It works pretty much the same in any word processor, where when you have your ruler showing, you will just move this bottom button over. And so then what happens when you type is that when it wraps around, it's automatically going to indent the second and subsequent lines so that you don't have to hit return and enter every time. It's just going to do that automatically. And then when you have your next one, it goes flush left, and again when you get to the second line, it's going to automatically wrap. So if you have to edit something, you don't have to worry about changing where the enters are or tabbing over or anything like that. So this will keep it a lot cleaner for you. So a couple more things, but we're almost done here. In terms of when is it okay for you to use the words of somebody else versus when do you need to paraphrase? Basically, and I have this on another slide, almost everything needs to be paraphrased. You should only retain the words of the authors if it's important for you to use those exact words. It's more scholarly to paraphrase, and it also keeps you out of trouble in terms of being able to put something into your own words. You still need to give credit to the author when you do that. And in the narrative, when you give credit to somebody for their work, the last name of the author and the publication date need to be included. You do not include the first initials for the author when you're including it in the text. So an example would be if I'm making some statement about a previous study, at the end of the line, I would put the author's ampersand before the last name, comma, and then the publication date. I could also use these names at the beginning of the sentence outside of parentheses, so I could say Connolly G, the word and Walsh conducted a study in which they found students needed to have adequate keyboarding skills in order for word processors to impact writing quality. So if I do that, then I would put the publication date in parentheses by itself after the name. So there's a couple different ways that you can introduce it into text, but you need to have author and publication date in the narrative itself. If there's no author, you would abbreviate the title inside parentheses, and the information that you include at the end or at the beginning when you introduce the author information has to always be listed fully in the reference list at the end of the document. If you do quote, and like I just said, you do that very sparingly, only when it's absolutely necessary to use the words of the author. If you do have to quote, then there's basically two different formats, depending on how long the quotation is. If your quotation is less than 40 words, then you would use double quotation marks within the narrative itself. You must also refer to the author, the publication date, and the page number. If you have a quotation that is 40 words or more, then you don't use quotation marks and instead you block and dent the entire thing. I've already talked about what needs to be there. So 2 examples. So this one is a short quote where first the author's name is introduced along with the publication date. Double quotation marks are used, followed by the page number in parentheses and then the period. So the page number comes after quotation marks, or we could group all of the author information or publication information at the end instead. So Brown, comma, 2009, comma, page 4. So either way is perfectly acceptable as long as the quoted material is inside the quotation marks. For a longer quote, like I said, it's block indented, so we would introduce the quotation with a colon, and then all of this would be quoted content. We end with a period and then put P period 4 or whatever page number in parentheses, no period after that, and we would begin the following text flush left. And that's it.